So, Mark, this is brilliant. Thank you for having me in your studio. We're sitting in Pensa studio right now on the last day of NYC by Design, and you're well into your 20th year as a firm. Yeah, for those that don't know, we're right in the heart of Dumbo here in Brooklyn. It's showing me around. We saw the Brooklyn Bridge from the window, so that's awesome. So yeah, we're just going to start off by introducing yourselves, really. So who you are, how the two of you actually came to be sitting in this room together, and then give me the version of Pensa you'd want a listener to hold in the head for a while. Yeah, Marco, we'll take it first. Who are you? What's your background? And how did this all start?
Yeah, so I went to school for engineering, and then really wanted to be an inventor the whole time, and then realized that the way they were teaching engineering at the time was really more about looking things up, and everything had already been invented. So graduating that, I went into industrial design graduate school to get a better sense of how products are made and actually do more of the invention side. And when I was there, I realized I was a much better engineer than actually the designer portion of it, but the process was very much what I really enjoyed. So I went into product design, started working at large agencies where I met Mark, and left, did a bunch of different little startup things that came and went, like fizzled out more than augured in. But and so like just rebooted and started Pensa and convinced Mark to come and join us.
Awesome. Was it a tough sell?
Alcohol played a role.
Yeah. I would say it wasn't a tough sell, but it was like a multi-stage process. I think even before you started Pensa, we talked about doing something when you were still kind of doing your own smaller engineering practice. And at the time, I mean, I'm quite a bit younger than you. So,
and it shows.
Felt like I was at a like slightly different stage. Yeah, I mean, well, taking a step back to that beginning, right? So I went to school for industrial design. I feel like I had like the sort of same story that I've heard over and over again from industrial designers about why they went into industrial design. It was like, I was the kid who was drawing all the time and taking apart my toys and building forts in the woods with my friends, and was always making something. And kind of stumbled on, I went to Carnegie Mellon for industrial design, but really I went for design. I don't think I totally even understood what industrial design was in the mid 90s. And I feel like I just got lucky, because once I discovered that, it was immediate, oh, this is what I was meant to do.
How did there's a story I hear a lot. Industrial design is something that designers almost fall into and fall in love with. How did you get to understand what ID industrial design actually is?
Well, I in a way, and I feel lucky because I came right out of high school and went to university, and happened to go somewhere where this existed, right? Which I think for a lot of, and I was in school with a lot of people getting their bachelor's degree who had already had an engineering degree, or already had a business degree or something. Then they discovered it in their 20s or late 20s. So I feel lucky in that way. It was first year foundation design, drawing, understanding form, understanding composition, and then visiting the studios of the graphic design, or at the time they were changing over, calling it communication design program, and the studios of the industrial design program, the second, third, fourth year, and seeing what they were doing and making the connection to the foundation classes that we were taking, and immediately understanding that absolutely that was what I was meant to do. And so, you get to make that decision like halfway through the first year, and then off you go. And so, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I have like all these luck moments throughout my career. I mean, and you have to kind of seize them when they come. But, from there, graduating, trying to find a design firm, or really any kind of design job where I'd be making something coming out of school. And I was looking at, in Chicago and on the West Coast and in New York. And originally I got an internship at a smaller firm at the time called Echo Design, which was great, had some learning experiences. I got introduced to some people at Smart Design and got first employed there as a designer. And that's where I started working on Marco.
Yeah.
And first, that was first real exposure to actually like working with engineers and really being able to invent new things that work in a new way. That ignited a whole different kind of passion and way of thinking of what we could do.
Awesome. And where does the name Pensa come from?
So pensa means think in Latin languages.
Okay.
So like Italian, Spanish, whatever, pensa, or as Mark's mom once said, like,
Well, I think it was my mother-in-law actually.
Yeah.
Said it means think in Italian. She said, "Why would you want to think in Italian?" That was close.
Oh, amazing. So for people that aren't familiar with thinking in Italian, if you could tell, give us a summary of what you do here, who's it for, the kind of typical kind of projects. I see there's a handful behind you there. There's a nice shiny new IF award as well. So congrats on that. But yeah, give us the elevator pitch.
Well, what we do often is work on things that are difficult, right? So there's like maybe an engineering technical challenge and a design challenge, but the experience has to be cohesive, where it can't just be like engineered and wrapped in design. And so people will come to us to try to solve those problems. Well, often there's a big strategy component too. Those kind of also grow into what the tech is and then what the design is. And so we try to get everybody involved early to really buy into what the user ultimate experience is, so that, everybody's pulling the cart in the same direction.
And the disciplines you cover, obviously your engineering, your ID, with a bit of overlap, but in terms of the studio, at what stage do you get involved? Is it right the strategy, or is there a general flow to these projects?
Yeah, we get involved in the strategy portion, of which a lot of times that'll just, end up in the strategy that they have to think about, especially these large organizations. And then other times they're, going from, blank page to part in a box, shipped to a consumer, all the way through to sourcing, working with the factories, et cetera. And then within those disciplines, there's the engineering group, there's mechanical, we have electrical, we're doing software, firmware, backend, cloud integration, with IoT, you have to load all that stuff up into the cloud. And then on the industrial design side, really it's a design group. There's they're doing user interfaces as well, but it's certainly the industrial design, but ultimately it's the cohesive experience of it all, whether it's coming through a digital interface or holding the product and using it, opening the packaging, going through the packaging, understanding how to read the manual or not read the manual.
So it's full end to end.
Yeah.
And everything in between. Yeah.
I mean, I think that what we do, and sometimes how we talk about ourselves, is invention, and not invention like the kind of tinkering, person with an idea in the garage, although that is somewhat what we do. But, and I think that's where the crossover of our common passion and interest, things we worked on, even in the 90s together, where the exciting projects were, okay, here's this experience or here's this evolution of a product, but what can we add to it and invent some new way that's better for people, that takes friction out of an experience. And, and that really takes that kind of combination of brains of thinking of technically what can we do, how can we achieve it, and then looking at it always from that user experience, from the connection to a brand, and that crossover and collaboration was, I think, the way that we always wanted to work. And so when we kind of came back together, we had that vision of how to build teams under that, and of course then that went from industrial design and mechanical primarily, which is like our backgrounds, to, getting into brands, to getting into digital experiences, user interface. As that evolved, products become more connected, more service connection, and then the engineering capabilities, rapidly expanding into those other areas, electrical, electromechanical, software, and really wanting to create thoughtful, holistic experiences, but needing to have all that capability in-house so that we can say yes when someone says, do you do that?
Yeah. It's a lot easier to win business if you can do a lot of things. So, yeah,
sure.
amazing. And it's the last day of NYC by Design today. You guys are having an open studio. There's a party going on. We spent the week amongst the design community. What's been the most interesting conversation or thing that you guys have seen this week?
I always like to ask people who are in other agencies how business is going, because it's really it's a bellwether as to the economy, because we're always working on things that ship in 2 years maybe.
Yeah.
So, we get to see, of course, the technologies way ahead before they ship. We get to see technologies way, like we saw foldable phones 10 years before they came out because we were working on it. And but it's interesting to find out, like, whatever the weather is here, it's going to appear in 2 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I always like those kind of conversations, trying to figure it out.
Well, how is the industry doing right now, from the conversations?
Tumultuous. Well, I think you know what it is? It's that people in businesses can't calculate uncertainty, so they have a hard time placing bets.
Yeah.
And so we have the projects that we have are very long-term projects where they basically can't help but just keep going.
Yeah.
Because they're going to take years to come out, because usually like a medical product with like regulatory portions of it take a long time. And so those are pretty stable. But the ones that are like, oh, we just need to get something out, they're like, yeah, we're going to hold, you know.
Yeah. I've certainly heard that a lot. And this week, well, the last 18 months, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to that point, it's great to get together with our peers and hear about what everyone's working on and where they're kind of seeing things moving. I mean, obviously we're at a point where there's like rapid evolution in a technology that's kind of upending a lot of what everyone's doing, but that's interesting as well, just in, where people are using AI to augment the type of work that they're doing, which is very much the way we see it, as not a replacement for anything, but a way to add capability and some productivity. But I'm also New York. I think New York by Design is different maybe than some of the other kind of design weeks in other cities, where there's so many different rooted design practices in New York, from, fashion and advertising and brand and architecture, and, product design is a piece of that here. Right. But whereas I think in some other cities, it's a much bigger portion of what's going on. So you get that, cross, play between all these different disciplines, and there's lots to learn from that, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. So I think a lot of the things, whether it's like architectural installation, or like fashion, there's really, a lot of interesting influences that you don't necessarily get in other places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would also add, like, in 2 weeks, it's going to be Tech Week here in New York, which also is quite different than, let's say, Tech Week Boston or Palo Alto or something like that. But it'll be interesting to see, what the weather is like in Tech Week. And we run a thing called Pancakes, which is we get a bunch of startups, or some people are more scale ups, and they all have questions, and a lot of times they weren't projects. So what we do is we say, well, why don't we just all get together, have a coffee, and, build on the community and really just share ideas and exchange contacts. Some people in need, they're looking for funding. Who are the people who are interested, or some people are looking for prototyping or some sort of resource. And we just try to connect them all. And that often also leads to a discussion of like, how are things going? And because if you're too far back, everything is like, oh, all the money's going towards AI, but it can't be true entirely, right? So like, where else are people placing bets and so on? Because the way I think about it, it's like, when we started this business, it's like, what I'm going to do? I'm going to work on projects. I'm going to like design and invent, right? But really what we do on a day-to-day basis, Mark and I, and actually we have a third party partner, Kathy, um, is design the company, right? And that's our project, right? And so like our research is talking to the community constantly and finding out like, where's everybody going? What's the next prototype that we should be doing for Pensa as a company,
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that segues nicely into my next question, actually. So, you're in your 20th year, and you look back to, those formative days, and you're putting your business plan together. Does that picture from back then, does it look like Pensa today, or how far apart are you?
I think it does. I mean, honestly, I think it's even more than we maybe thought it could be. Obviously, I mean, a lot of the types of projects that we work on now didn't exist then. So I think that would have been hard to necessarily have the foresight to say that would happen. But essentially, you know, that passion and belief that we needed different kinds of brains with different kinds of technical and skills backgrounds, and really passionate people put together, working collaborative. We wanted to have like a more small, intimate environment than maybe some of the larger firms that we had worked at, and we've kept that vision. But um, the notion of like adding these different capabilities together and having everyone working on things together from the beginning of projects, so that we're not doing handoffs of like, well, the designers create a vision and then we hand it to an engineering team and they, tell us what can't be done, and then like they, wrap it all together and then we hand it off. It's like, no, we really think that, the best inventive new solutions to problems are going to come from all of these different disciplines, from research and design and engineering capability together from the beginning, working through everything together. And we've maintained that as we've expanded the capabilities of what we're capable of doing. And so in a way, I'd say yes, like this would be the vision that we had set forth. I just think it's better and more exciting than what we, I think, could have imagined.
Let's pause for a moment. If you need a contract mechanical engineer next week, the easy option is to pull a list of keyword matches and hope on sticks. It's not what we do. At Kodu, we work exclusively in physical product development. We know what good looks like at senior level because we've spent over a decade in this market. Every contractor we introduce is properly vetted, referenced and assessed for real delivery experience, not just software skills on a CV. We can move in under 24 hours, but we do not compromise on quality to do it. So if you need proven contractor support without the gamble, connect with me, Chris White, on LinkedIn, and let's move properly.
Awesome. So two of you met at Smart Design back in the late 90s. You went different ways for a period of time, but kept in touch, and then ended up building Pensa together. So I want to spend a few minutes just on how that actually happened, because it's fairly rare, in the industry. Because that sounds like it's the foundation that Pensa's really built on, that collaboration, and the together. So let's take back to that kind of moment in the 90s. What did you see in each other that made you think, I'd like to work with that person, I'd like to be a business partner with that person one day?
I think for me, it was that you have to strive for design excellence, but when there's a clash with like engineering realities, that can go one of two ways, right? That could go into a headbutting, sort of where each person has their own goal, whether it's like it has to physically work or it has to come in within the right price point or whatever. Or there's or you can work with designers who like understand that those are realities and help achieve the vision regardless by adjusting the design to get to the right point, right? So like sometimes you need to dig in your heels to say that this is really the vision. And you're not thinking creatively as an engineer to help me get there. And then there's also that other pushback where like, okay, this is the vision you have. How can this be molded into something that can be made? And working with Mark, it was always very smooth in that way where we're like, always, never argue, never. Yeah. It's just silk. But, there is this like, okay, we have to achieve the vision isn't particularly this way of manufacturing or this way of looking at the form language or whatever. The vision is the experience. And like we have to march towards that. Right. And like I said, we have a third partner who runs the business, not a designer, not an engineer, only focuses on business. And
which is really awesome.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons that we're healthy is because like
why we're still here after 20 years. That's why we're still.
Yeah. And so that's Kathy, and she was also at Smart Sign. Yeah. So it was because it was a breeding ground of creativity in the 90s. And there is somebody who has to just, constantly design and work and optimize the business itself. Like, and how do you make it? And so you were asking like, are we the same today as we were in the past? The reality is that like, you have sort of a vision of where you're going, but it is very much a random walk. But as long as you keep, perturbing yourself back into center, like if you're just walking through Central Park and try to get to the north side, you could take a very long path. But as long as you keep knocking back and looking up and saying like, which way's north, right? As long that's the way I've seen it. And we've definitely had stumbles and we've had sprints where we're doing great. And we survived Hurricane Sandy. This building was basically underwater, all the way up to the second floor. We had the 2008 financial crisis. I left to go on my own April of 2001 in New York, and then watch the Twin Towers come down, which, so there's a lot of things that are like completely out of your control. And there's also a lot of things that you do that you think are going to be great. You're like, oh, that was a fumble.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just keep just knocking back to center. Right. But it's definitely not this like arrow, right? But you just keep waddling away and you keep going in the right direction.
When did Kathy join?
She and I started the companies.
Mm-hmm.
So Kathy and I are married, and the quick funny story was I had left in April of 2001.
Yeah.
I started a bunch of different things with friends. And then the one thing that I had that was, successful was an engineering group. Right. So, and it was the group, it was like me and, freelancer and eventually a single employee. But it was always late stage engineering, like we're nearly done with a project and we're running behind, can you fix it? The unscrewer upper, and so I wanted to swim upstream. I was like, we need to get back into design so that it's not screwed up at the end that I'm fixing. And so then, bringing in Mark was like, okay, we can go upstream. And then with design and engineering, we went a little further upstream with strategy to go into design and engineering down. And that was always the idea, because then we could actually have an effect on the final product.
Yeah. So it just flows nicely, doesn't it? So that by the time engineering is involved, you're finishing rather than fixing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maintaining the vision and making sure, to carry it across the finish line, versus like being brought in when the vision's already set. I'd say my perspective on how we started together is maybe a little different.
Look at that old man over there.
Or what I like about Marco. I was at Smart Design longer also. So, I was there for over 8 years. And it was really, I mean, it was an awesome place to be at the time. It still is a great firm, just awesome work, and we're still close with a lot of people there. But at that time, and then in the kind of mid late 90s, there was this momentum, and it was really growing. There were, awesome designers and engineers from all over the world, so there was like this cultural learning going on and cross-cultural, collaboration, and still some of my best friends are people I worked with back then. But that kind of exposure to different types of, ways of thinking, different people, at that age, when I was like even first coming out of school, it was very formative, and you start to see, what types of people you can really work with closely and get things done and have the same kind of mindset. So, I mean, Marco's very modest, but he's like pretty remarkable person as far as
Heard that.
as far as his this is the first time I'm telling you. As far as as an engineer, for sure, person who can make things and understands how things work, but the breadth of knowledge across a lot of different disciplines is very unique. The real appreciation for, and being a designer yourself, like you would say you're not, but you are. So like, being a designer and an engineer, and, having that, open appreciation for and respect for, what designers do, and also the core foundational knowledge of with the way a lot of things work, and a real curiosity, was something that I was really always drawn to. And, we went apart for a while. I mean, I was, you had started, I think, 2 other companies, but after leaving Smart, I was there for several more years. I went to work for Frog Design for a couple of years. Another awesome experience, very different. At the time, I think it was like 10 offices around the world, and 1,000 employees, and was working, for things for Microsoft, going to the Seattle office and traveling, and great experience. And in a way that it kind of reinforced a little bit of what I didn't want to be doing. Like it was very fast paced, which was good, but you were working on a lot of things at once. It felt kind of scattered to me. And, getting back to that feeling of just like working with people you really respect, and, in a smaller team, was something I was looking for anyway. So when we started talking again after you had already started Pensa, and the kind of vision for what you wanted to bring in and where you wanted to go really like struck a chord with me at that point. And I was much more able to say, okay, like I'm ready to take this leap and try to build this from the ground up, at that point, as opposed to like several years before, where I felt like maybe I needed some more experiences and different kinds of experiences. And so at the point where we actually started talking again, then it made a lot more sense. And of course, like, I really love the idea of working with Marco and Kathy again, who I'd actually worked with Kathy longer at Smart.
Yeah, you worked with Kathy longer than I did.
Yeah. You left long before she did. So we had a relationship already. And so, I mean, it just felt right at the time. It was certainly like a risk of leaving this big firm that I certainly had a career trajectory at. I was a senior designer there, but there were places to go, and there was a path there to be doing awesome things and stay there for a long time. But I just felt like this was just such a unique opportunity to come in when, Pensa was still small, and for us to, shape this the way we wanted to, which I wouldn't say I necessarily thought it would be 20 years, but
Yeah.
but here we are.
Yeah, amazing. You kind of preempted one of my questions a moment ago. I was going to ask about superpowers. So I presume you would describe Marco's superpower as, the curiosity, the designer within the engineer, the appreciation for design.
Yeah, I would say, like, even beyond that, there's more than any other person that I've ever known, the ability to, you know, honestly, it sounds crazy, but to know how to do anything. And if even that sounds like not, obviously that's not true, but there's no question that I would ever ask Marco where he would say, I don't know. Like, which a lot of people would say that to a lot of questions, right? It's like, may not know, but as a seed understanding of where the answer might be, and pretty rapidly can figure out how to get there, even if it's within an area where, we maybe are just on the fringe of understanding of, right? So that curiosity plus, the ability to make things happen, I think is very unique. Yeah.
I think it's a blissful ignorance than just going like, like, had I known how hard this would have been, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's a good characteristic too.
Just sort of like hubris, like, I don't know, we can figure it out.
And Marco, what would you say is Mark's superpower?
Well, Mark's for sure is like design rock star. I mean, honestly, I'm not saying that lightly, and I think again with like, maybe it was the schooling at CMU, which is very heavy in tech development and industrial design. It's like that's Carnegie Mellon. Actually, that's what he wanted to create was, or Carnegie and Mellon was a school that was very strong in both the arts and the technical side. And I think that still pervades now. And I think with that background and your approach to problems in that way is that actually filters down to the way we run projects, the way we attract people, the way we bring them up and mentor them. And that's really Mark. I mean, like for me, what's kind of funny, hearing what you're saying is when I look at our website, I'm like, I didn't do any of these. I think this is all Mark's work.
That's not true.
I wasn't like, I don't know. These are like the things that people mostly excited about. Like maybe I should put some of my work up there. But no, it's totally true. Like all these, beautiful experiences, beautiful products, but there's nothing superfluous. And I think again, there's like, he's really good at like having a vision and then somehow getting it made, because a lot of times it's like we have this great vision and then it's like, oh, well, our clients want to sell a lot of products. So it's like, that would be great. 2 people will buy it because it's like so, niche or esoteric. And that's never the case. And very, very, I wouldn't say like stubborn is the wrong word, but like making sure that vision gets executed is, and very much so. And like keeps me in check a lot of times. Most of the time, people are like, "Oh, why don't we do this?" No, that's a terrible idea.
Awesome. I feel like we've made a lot of progress, so that's brilliant.
Yeah, I know. This is like therapy. We should bring in Kathy.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we want to hear what Kathy says about us.
Yeah. These guys like to blow budgets.
Yeah. We'll do like a bonus episode.
Yeah.
What really goes on. But, founders, partners, businesses, they fall out all the time. And I'm sure you guys have had your disagreements,
Yeah.
What's the thing you do deliberately or not to, that's kept this partnership going for all these years?
We'll let Kathy make the decision.
Yeah. We go to mom.
I think it relates back to where some of those and I think, a lot of people start design firms and it's like a couple of designers get together and, they understand each other. They understand what they do. But in a way, they're like kind of redundant. It's like, all right, that's great, but who has the technical capability? Who knows how to run a business? Yeah. And so in a way, like, yeah, of course we have disagreements and, it comes back to, respecting the expertise of, who your partners are. And the fact that we have, some crossover expertise, but a lot of, our own deep knowledge in certain areas. So, there is oftentimes like a default person to say, actually, this is right, and here's why. So I think like that in a way, it's like the setup of the partnership is the resolution to the issues that arise, because we all look at things from a very different perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the, like we said, like I started a couple of different things. I started it with friends. And the first thing I realized is the last thing you want is partners that do the same thing that you do. For one thing, you have to like sell twice as much of the business because you're doing, if we had all designers here, then, who's going to get the project? That's the first lesson. And then the other thing is that you really need to round out all the different disciplines that it needs to encompass in a business. And that includes sales, marketing, which is frankly most of what a founder does, right? And and when you round it out, like then you have to have a lot of trust in that person. And it's one thing to work under the umbrella of a large corporate that has to handle all that stress. But when it's on you and stuff goes sideways, like again, like I don't know, 2008 or something, then you're like, you really have to fall into like, okay, all we have is each other to figure this out. And there's times at first there's tension, and now over 20 years we know each other so well, we trust each other that it'd be like, okay, this is we fall on each other to support it. And it's much harder than it sounds. I mean, a lot of times people describe, business partnership as a marriage, and it really is, because you're like, look, like,
Especially if you are married.
especially if you're married to one of the partners. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's highly, highly recommended.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So, the phrase interdisciplinary studio gets thrown around a lot, but you guys are genuinely kind of living that. You described how everyone's involved right from the start of the project, and it saves a lot of the kind of the traditional kind of silos. Throw in the over the fence kind of thing. So, but give us maybe an example where that kind of model has broken or hasn't worked so well. If there has been any.
On projects,
Yeah,
where interdisciplinary breaks.
Yeah,
I think that's our constant work, is to make it work. Because if it doesn't, then like that's kind of our brand, right? So the thing that I discovered early in my career was that engineers are really trying to build something repeatable and make it built on prior knowledge of how things are made. And that's a scientific sort of background with an application, right? Where like, this has been proven to work, and so we're going to do this again. And then designers are trying to make something unique. So the last thing you want to do is go to like the rule book of how things are done. Yeah. And that's coming from a more artistic background, that if it's not unique, it's derivative of something, which could be one of the worst things you could ever say to a designer or an artist, is like, it's competent and derivative. Yeah. And so like
average.
It's good. It sure reminds me of the other really good products. So when you have that, there's the natural conflict of like the person trying to do the same thing as they did last year and the person who's trying to do something completely new, right? So like you have to get them to actually want to do something together. And what our job is trying to get the team to act in that way. And we've had people with big egos. We've had people with that are correct, but sit back. Mm-hmm. They're like, I don't know, this is the way they want to do it, and, you have to go back and be like, but you might be the correct person, right? Yeah. And so like, that's really our work, is try to get the team like really gelling all the time.
Yeah. I would say it's like, when does it break? I'd say it breaks on every project. But it almost it needs to, right? Because you can. There is certainly an intention of bringing everyone together and making sure the influences are equally weighted early on. But at some point you're going to start to go down a path that may start to stray too far in any direction, right? Maybe it's that, we're being too forceful about this vision of what the design has to be versus, the engineering realities, it's and the kind of red flags that are being thrown up of like, this is going to become a problem at some point. And then, when it does inevitably become a problem in whatever, concept we're developing, the ability to then regroup and say, okay, like, where did we go wrong? Like, put everyone's egos aside and, make a correction. I think like that, requires a certain amount of humility, but also a respect for, the expertise of who you're working with. I mean, and specific examples, like I can think of many. I mean, we were working on, for years, we've done, razors for a startup called OneBlade, and they're, the original ones, very high end, mechanically complex, beautiful design vision for what the design language should be. And the original version that we did, we had this pivoting mechanism that the designers, partly me in particular, was very focused on the idea that the pivoting mechanism would almost be invisible, right? That this would move in this magic way and slide on this track that was hidden inside, and we devised this way that you had like this, self-lubricant, like a Delrin sleeve that slid in that allowed it to move, and the tolerance stack up and whatever else. It just was like we were beating our heads against the wall, like, machine prototype after machine prototype after machine prototype, try to make this work. And we could not get the force to be right as you're pressing it on your face to move smoothly. And Marco and another engineer who were working on it with the design team at the time, like, we can make this move exactly the same way and be smooth and precise. We have to have a pin and an obvious, pivot moment, right? Like we're sliding on this track, it's not working. And, after forcing the issue for a number of revisions, we eventually, had another meeting with the client. We said, like, we're going to change the way that we're pivoting this. And, we explained why and gave them a new vision for what it would look like with that, which was also beautiful. And it worked. Smooth sailing. Like, everything just worked as we needed it to. And, we eventually that geometry became the foundation of all the razors that we've done for them since. But, that's going to happen, right? Like there's going to be a push and pull. And at some point, you have to have that moment where you say, you know what, like, it's not giving up to admit that, we need to pivot to a direction that's simpler, and simple is usually better.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned egos. Just saying, I'm guessing from that, people with egos don't fit in here. You can't have an ego and kind of trying to run the show.
Yeah.
What kind of profile of person does thrive at Pensa?
I'll take it. We definitely spend like a third of the hiring process, if not a half, on attitude. The funniest ones I get are the interns with big egos. Because it's like, you don't really have the right to have an ego yet. No, I think that's it is sand in the Vaseline if you have somebody who cannot help move the project. And it was a hard lesson learned. We've definitely made that mistake.
Mhm.
And then it often turns out it's that the trick in the hiring process is that the people who have big egos often present very well. And the people who are humble but very talented often are a little too humble in the hiring process. So you got to like draw it from them. And, especially like engineers, the challenge is that they don't know how to present at the hiring stage, right? They don't come with they do now come with portfolios, but it's not one of their strengths. And then on the flip side, there are designers who are like super flashy portfolios, but it's very lightweight as to what actually happened and what did they do, versus what maybe the larger team that they worked on. And so like you have to really go deeper and spend a lot of time. And on the engineering side, we have like we somewhere in the middle, we started throwing like a tech interview, which wasn't like, can you get the answer right? It was more of like, what's your process and what do you know? And it's been incredibly revealing because honestly, the questions are very basic and I don't even care if you get them right, but just the way they answer it, you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
You know, who is this person really? You only have like, you have like, if you put it together, 3 to 5 hours with these people and maybe a few phone calls and you're like, that's all you have, you know, to figure out, are they going to be great?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I would as far as the type of people that work here, or that work out here, you know, it's usually similar, like critical thinkers, self-motivated, yeah, lack of ego, passionate, you know, and I think that is something that is maybe not that hard to suss out in an interview. Is like how passionate they are about what they're doing. I think that the talent and like technical skills, all that, it's kind of like a baseline. Like, you know, we're gonna like weed out the bottom 95% before we even talk to people. So then, you know, yeah, we're in a pretty tight, like intimate environment here. You know, it's like New York Design Studio. There's not a lot of space. And so we're on top of each other, working together every day. Like you have to be able to trust people. You have to, you know that they are critically thinking and, you know, working to come up with, and when they run into conflicts, working to find a series of solutions before they come back to you, you know, and not say like run into a roadblock and, you know, say, now what do I do? It's like you know, so that kind of self-motivation and critical thinking, I think is a big, you know, component, you know, beyond the, you know, design skills, storytelling, all of that from the design side and from the engineering side, I think.
And it's not just ego too. It's like, you can't get people who think like, oh, well, that's not my job. You know what I mean? Or they might be super entitled or, you know, so honestly, getting people to be friends and not just colleagues, really makes the projects a lot smoother because they lift each other up no matter what discipline they're on. Right. You know, sometimes there's a deadline or whatever, you know, they really try to help each other out. And so like, you really got to find people who could fit, you know, and honestly, like being a small studio, like there's not a lot of slots open and then not that often either. And so if you're going to pick in a slot, we spend probably way too much time thinking about who's the right person.
Yeah, but it's the old adage, isn't it? Hire slow, fire fast. You know,
Yes.
it's brutal, but it's, you know, take your time, and make the right choice. Hopefully, are you seeing AI kind of disrupt hiring? You know, I hear stories of, you know, people that reading notes while they're on a video call, looking up the answers, that kind of thing, or, you know, or even just, you know, fake resumes is a big thing, or over tailored resumes, a big thing.
I get, you know what happened with I could say from the tech interview, like that we do, I went from people giving people like a short amount of time just so that they just really gave us the raw answers to giving them a week, because if they have AI and they, you know, pretty quickly I started seeing the AI answers. And then I also saw the AI presentation because you can kind of see that they used Notebook LM or whatever, perfect presentation. And so if I gave them more time, what would they do then? You know? And so they're like, oh, well, I only spent like an hour on it. And I got the tech answer. I mean, I got the AI answer. And then there's other people who are like, we're a little bit more thoughtful about it. And I think it must be harder on the design side because everybody's got a rendering and a good portfolio now, right? It's not a skill.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's pretty easy to, if you're really digging into people's process and thinking and how they got from one point to another. At this point, I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, 2 years from now it's gonna be the same. I think it's still pretty easy to pick out from a design portfolio whether they have the skills or not, you know, or if they're, you know, generating things with AI. I mean, it's not a problem with using AI, but for one thing, you should be upfront about it, of where you used it. But it's a tool, and it has its place, and and its place is not producing a final design, and so as a tool in the toolbook, fine. But if people are like going like, here was my project prompt and here's my beautiful solution and there's nothing else there, like it's not that hard to to pull that out. And frankly, it's not even that much different than when rendering software. It's like 15 years ago, to be really great at producing like decent level product renderings was like a skill that you had to develop over a long period of time, and you really had to almost understand photography and lighting and everything else just to have that right. Like that's kind of been like democratized. So even just producing the beautiful object, or a beautiful rendering, like you still had to look deep below that anyway. So whether you're looking deep below that or you're looking deep below like an AI generated solution, it's not that different, I don't think.
I would say also like we're working on physical products. If it was just like here's 20 logos or something that I did, whatever, like that different. But I don't know, like you're really looking for somebody who's got a passion for what you're doing. This is not a job. This is a career, right? You're not looking for somebody who really will just like check in, do the work and go home, because if you don't love it, this is not the most lucrative career. There's much better. I heard because of the because of the World Cup that the hotel lobbies and the people who clean the rooms have to get $100,000 a year or something. They said something like that today in the news, and it's like, well, that's a much more lucrative job. And then you go home at the end of the day and not worry about it. But I'm looking for people who like don't use 3D printers, but build their own because it's interesting on their spare time in their basement, or build their own CNC machines, or think about electromechanics as a hobby. And you're not going to AI your way out of that discussion, right? And so same with the design side. People like are sketching when they have nothing else to do. Those are the people you look for, because this is what they're thinking about all the time, right? I mean, that's the way I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah, and especially for young designers, it's oftentimes the most interesting parts of their portfolio, are not the like, here was my assignment and here's how I worked through it and solved it. I mean, people have awesome school projects for sure, but it's like sometimes like, here's my sketchbook where like I play with drawing hands and handheld objects, and like I just do this for fun, and it's like, well, that's the coolest thing in your portfolio. And but that also gives you the notion that, or the understanding that this person is passionate and they're thinking about this all the time. And really, like, this job, what we do, like it's 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 you got to shut it off sometimes, but like I'm at my kids' baseball games and I'm thinking about whatever project or something going on with a client, or it's going on all the time. And so if you don't love it and if you're not passionate about it, it's not like part of who you are and what you want to be thinking about all the time. Like, it's not really going to work that well. Or maybe there are design jobs where that can work, but not here.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Let me interrupt for 30 seconds with something most hardware founders learn the hard way. The skills that get you from prototype to product are not the same skills that get you from product to scale. That transition is where leadership matters. At Kodu, we help physical product companies hire senior leaders who can formalize roadmaps, build world-class teams, and align product with commercial strategy. Director, VP, C-suite. If you are entering a new category, raising capital, or professionalizing your product function, this is not a hire to rush. So find me, Chris White, on LinkedIn, and let's talk before you make the call.
Well, let's talk about spin outs and Pensa Labs, because I'm conscious we're coming up on time and we've not even talked about, you know, the big machines that you guys are making. So, you know, talk us through, Pensa Labs, how that came to be. Maybe just do a quick intro into what it is.
I'll do the start, but then you could talk about all the details. So, so we we've always kind of done concept projects. As you know, there's like ebbs and flows of design agency, and I think many years back we were, you know, as we were really trying to get the word out of, hey, Pensa exists, and here's what we are, here's what we do. You know, we'd work on getting speaking gigs, or you know, publishing articles, whatever it might be. And, you know, at a certain point, we started shifting that downtime more to taking the team and generating concepts about things we were passionate about. And then as we started doing that, a few of them got some press and got some interest outside of what we're doing. So we did these mobile solar charging stations that were like 11 feet tall and were all over New York City at one point, called Street Charge. That came from an internal concept project that we were like, let's try something in public space, because we don't really get to do that. You know, we did a urban bicycle as part of like this national invite competition that used to exist, called the Bike Design Project. It was, you know, really fun and got a ton of interest and interest in Pensa because of the press around it. But it was also like this, you know, awesome minimal urban bicycle where the rack was spring loaded and disappeared into the frame when you weren't using it, and you know, everything was kind of hidden but had all this functionality. And so it had this vision of what we thought an urban bike could be. We did a few others of those, and some of them were just, you know, some articles written about them, they didn't go anywhere. And then one of them was like an engineering led concept project where we had different projects where we were doing things with wire, and like a lot of times they were like either furniture structures or shower caddies, and it's very hard to prototype. Like, you can't get one-off prototypes, like you're bending a lot of stuff by hand. And the engineering team, you know, said like, I feel like, why can't we just like take a vector line and, you know, drop it in a piece of software, and, you know, we'll put a series of motors together, and like CNC bending exists, but why is there a desktop version of this for people like us? And so spare parts around, like made a simple piece of software, made this, you know, little desktop version, and it worked. And so from there,
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those like launch and learn kind of projects where, you know, we would launch a machine. Actually, the first thing was people came to us, they want to buy one. And we're like, why would you ever want to buy one? This is like pretty niche. Like, we needed it for ourselves. So we open sourced it. And what that actually ended up doing was grew a community of people who were really interested about it, and got more press, and made more people want to buy it, which was like, no, we released the code. Here's the shopping list and put together. And I got a call from a guy. He said, listen, I don't put together my own inkjet printer. I just need one of these to work. And that was like, oh, okay. And so I really didn't think it would work. So I knew the machine would work, but not the business. So, but the staff was pretty excited about it. So we're like, okay, here's the way to kill it. We're going to put it on Kickstarter, and we're going to set the price pretty high, and we'll put it out there, which is also just another way to market it. And then it funded in one day. And so you're like, oh, now we have to do it. And so we launched it. And then when on the launch and learn concept was like, okay, this is for makers and schools and middle schoolers, and they can make, you know, whatever, instead of popsicle stick bridges, they'll make steel bridges. And that worked pretty well, but you start getting calls from, you know, certain industries. And when you get enough calls, you say like, okay, this industry is really interested, like orthodontics or aerospace, or, you know, medical implants and things like this. And so you're like, oh, we were making chairs. Like, these people actually have actual like businesses that really need this thing. So we kept on very carefully and slowly, because it's 100% bootstrapped, building out features that were specific to some of these industries and then going after them. but the idea from the Pensa side was still always true, which was like, if we couldn't really show all of the projects we were doing for large corporate because they're all hidden under some IP. And so if we make our own, then people can see all the tech that we can build. And we basically, the first, let's say maybe 5 to 10 years at Pensa, like, we did awesome work that nobody can see, even to this day, and we've even had clients like, you can't even tell them that you work with us. The bigger they are, the more power they have in saying these kind of things. So, this was making a very big marketing challenge. So with Pensa and the idea of like just calling it Pensa Labs so that these are related, you could say like, look at this tech. I'm going to show it because this is mine. So, and then it's like, oh, these guys can do this. Maybe you can do something else for us. Clearly, if you can figure that out. And then in doing that, it hires Pensa back. And then what it does is like, hey, we need a software team. We need an electronics team, and the challenge from the consultancy side is, there's projects you can land if you had some of those technical skills, but you don't, it's chicken and egg. You can't land it until you have a portfolio of examples of work that you've done, and you can't hire those people until you land the project. So in this way, we can say like, okay, well, here's a portfolio of things that we did, right? And so it's supposed to be a virtuous cycle where it also smooths out the ebbs and flows of a natural consultancy business. Always just goes with economy, seasons, quarterly profits, etc. Right? So like in that way, it offsets some of that.
Yeah.
And so when like things are slow, Pensa Labs has got a huge backlog of stuff that it needs done, right? So it goes back, and also it's a way to train designers that are junior into projects that we have a little bit more patience because we're pretty good clients, those kind of things. Sometimes, but this is a good way to discipline them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And is it simply a case of when the consultancy is quiet, then we kind of work on labs, or is there like a fixed like percentage of time and revenue or money that you put into labs?
It does tend to be like, if we're slower, we just like start accelerating because but in a perfect world, it's like any other client. We have a beginning, middle, end, we have a budget, etc. But it just never ends up working out that way. So like, certain things are urgent and certain things are like, okay, we will wait until we know we have a slot of time.
But it's not. It doesn't go dormant.
No.
I mean, because it is its own business, so it has. I mean, it has a small staff, but it has sales and an applications engineer, and so there's always development going on, and the fact that each machine is actually really tailored to a customer.
Yeah.
So there's a amount of, for everyone that's sold, there's an amount of development that's always going on with the Pensa Labs team. But yeah, as far as like, the more future vision stuff, like, well, the next generation, that's a project, right? And that's a design, engineering, software, industrial design, and UI development for the software. So those things, we're trying to run them as client projects, but as we get very, very busy, sometimes it's a little too easy to say to this client, because we know they're understanding, take a back seat. So we try not to do that, but it does happen sometimes.
Amazing. We are pretty much up to time, but I'm going to ask you a few quick fire questions, which my assistant has just shoved out of me. So I'm going to bounce between you. So Marco, the fastest way to lose trust with a new client?
Oh, overpromise and underdeliver.
That's a good one. Very true, yeah. And Mark, one thing you always look for in an industrial designer that nobody else tests for?
I mean, I don't know if it's nobody else tests for, but I would say curiosity would be number one, and then storytelling would be number two.
Yeah, awesome. Marco, a material or finish you obsess over that most people might just walk straight past?
That's interesting. I've accidentally become like a steel alloy nerd of like what is the difference between A2 and M2 and the finishes you can get out of it and the strength and so on, and it's like I would say for the first 90% of my career, steel was steel, and then stainless steel was stainless steel. And now I've learned that that's very much not the point. and there's some very specific steels that you really like have to dig and find out, you know.
Awesome. And then finally, the most underrated skill a young designer or an engineer can build.
Well, I probably said it already in my last two, but I would say storytelling. I mean, I think that, you know, again, somebody can have a beautiful result and it's not going to connect, with the audience. And a lot of what we do with our clients is like we have to bring them along a journey and have them buy into everything about the story of what we're trying to create together and how it ties into their brand or helps build their brand. So being able to tell your process and results as a story, and make it compelling and have the audience, drawn into it, I think is, very undertaught and lacking in a lot of the way designers present their work.
Yeah, absolutely. Storytelling, persuasion skills, like selling under another label, that's super important. So wonderful. Guys, it's been incredible going through this. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have too. But for anyone listening or watching that wants to find out more, is the best place is the website or LinkedIn? How should they reach out to you?
Yeah, either way.
So pensa.co.
Yeah.
Leave the M off for savings. and then pensalabs.com.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Why Design. If this episode gave you some new ideas, share it with someone in your team who'd find it useful. And follow the show so you don't miss what's next. And if you're building a product team or looking for your next challenge in design or engineering, that's exactly what we do at Kodu. We help companies hire smarter and faster and help great talent find work that actually fits. I'm Chris White. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let's keep raising the bar for design leadership. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep asking why design.